data can be had. The benefits, Mr. President, to the average Barbadian in terms of the hosting of this World Cup 2024 is not shrouded, Mr. President, in any big layer of secrecy, Mr. President. The benefits that for the fisher folk are not shrouded in secrecy, Mr. President. The fisher folk, the people who ply their trade at Oistins, can let you know immediately if they have seen increased sales, Mr. President. That is data too. They will let you know, Mr. President. The people that sell the balloons and the sweets and stuff on the road, Mr. President, can know and feel, Mr. President, if they have had increased sales. That is part of the data too as well, Mr. President. The gift horse, Mr. President. They continually want to kick the gift horse, Mr. President, in the mouth. They support, but show the data. They support, Mr. President, but we're not sure we're going to see the benefits, Mr. President. They support, Mr. President, yes, we agree. But we got to look at the interest payments, Mr. President, on the debt. The interest payments, Mr. President, that help to refurbish Kensington Oval. And Mr. President, I want to also state, and again, I seek your guidance because I will be referring to something that I had to raise in another debate on this matter, again, of the loan. Because, Mr. President, I had pointed out in that debate, and again, the Hansard report will show, that investment will be returned. I had indicated, Mr. President, that the government had invested in the installation of a 800 kilowatt photovoltaic system at Kensington Oval. And that system, Mr. President, is intended to be revenue generating, Mr. President, Hansard, Mr. President. I also at that time indicated that Kensington Oval was also going to be undertaking additional initiatives, including working with the University of the West Indies and cricket legends to see an expansion of tours, including Marble Cricket Tour, Mr. President, which has already started. I spoke, Mr. President, as well to the fact that COMI, Mr. President, is working on a grant. In fact, the grant was approved. At that time, it was not, but it was approved from the Caribbean Development Bank to examine the feasibility of leveraging the brand to sell cricket-based goods and services globally that are produced by micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. I spoke to the fact that COMI right now is looking and developing a plan to sell the naming rights of Kensington. I spoke about the fact that COMI is looking to see if we can use AI and the universe, the metaverse, Mr. President, to develop a game for Kensington and the enhanced efforts into marketing, Mr. President. That was in a previous debate. There was a previous debate, Mr. President, in here on the Green Paper on the sports policy, in which, again, we had a long discussion about cricket development because cricket was one of the areas that was prioritized for development along with road tennis. And that Green Paper, Mr. President, if we would all remember, identified cricket as a tourism potential for sports, Mr. President. It looked at cricket and IT, sports development and IT, Mr. President. It looked at all facets, even in terms of human resource potential, the human resource buildup that we need, Mr. President. It was the Democratic Labour Party that criticized the government in the estimates for indicating that we will have mini stadia throughout this country. The leader of the opposition said we don't need no mini stadia, but yet now we have a member here who's saying what's happening at the community level and what we're doing for sports. So they need to get the story right, Mr. President. Don't bring the factionalism in this honorable chamber. And that was a previous debate, Mr. President, that we had in here on those issues. So again, to be raising the issues, Mr. President, I find is unfortunate. Like I said, I would understand because I could understand right now they're a little bit distracted, Mr. President. But we've had those debates. We've had those debates fully ventilated on the future of cricket development, what was happening at the school level, Mr. President. We had the debate in here. We talked about the fact, and I went back to my own speech, that as part of the development here for Kensington, that we will have drop-in pitches, Mr. President. And that is not happening now, but that is part of the development and the long-term rollout that this government has for the vision of cricket, Mr. President. Mr. President, I was present at a meeting with Comey and the BCA, where in the context of discussion about the repayment of the loan, as the Honourable Senator Nichols has had to indicate, Mr. President, that one of the things that had to be done was a plan for cricket development by the BCA, and that was the basis upon which the continued investment by government would be made, because we understood as a government, and the Prime Minister challenged the BCA to ask them, what is your plan for the development of young cricketers? And that is why, Mr. President, you have the Ministry of Youth and Sports and Community Empowerment developing a plan for cricket coaches that is now being undertaken and rolled out in community to encourage the resuscitation of cricket at the community level, Mr. President. That is happening, and again, discussed in this honourable chamber. Again, so that the honourable members for the opposition side, Mr. President, please, Mr. President, I'm going to ask them, we give them a blight this time. Mr. President, I refuse to jump up on my feet because I said, okay, they're distracted. But I want to encourage them to make sure that before that they bring the spurious arguments in this place, in this honourable chamber, that they recall, Mr. President, the debates that we have had in here. And it is unfortunate that I have been forced to spend the time of the honourable chamber referring to previous debates that we would have made, previous points that we would have made in respect of these matters, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to ensure the Honourable Senator Christopher Maynard, in respect of his entreaty in relation to culture and heritage and the protection of culture and heritage. As the Honourable Senator would have indicated, the Physical Development Plan has an extensive section on culture and heritage, has an extensive section on how we would make sure that in the rollout of physical development plans in the future and approvals, that we would make sure that we seek to protect those areas. The Division of Culture is working very closely, again, as Senator Maynard would have alluded to, with all of those agencies that are so charged to be able to do so, to make sure that we work together collaboratively to make sure that we can protect those areas. The Division of Culture is, again, looking at legislation. We're now very in the early stages. We will be establishing a committee, again, bringing all of those agencies together in order to look at the rollout of the legislation to actually give tooth to the protection and also the process that is to happen when things like skeletal remains are found on various sites. But, Mr. President, it is on top of mind, and I want to thank the Honourable Senator for bringing the issue and making sure that we are sensitized to it, because it is extremely important. Our legacy is about culture and heritage as well. Mr. President, there was some discussion, again, about the long-term economic benefits, Mr. President. I will close shortly because I said I believe that all of the issues were either previously ventilated in other debates as well. But just to be able to say, Mr. President, it is about how we measure as well long-term economic benefits for this. The government of Barbados, recognizing that crop over will be happening immediately or after we've had Cricket World Cup. If you look at the marketing that has been taking place, we have been marketing the synergy between the two, telling people you come for World Cup but stay for crop over, Mr. President, offering packages so that we encourage those to either come back or as they travel around to the various islands, make sure they come back to Barbados here to participate in an activity. Mr. President, there is also as well, and I agree that we have to be able to measure, because it is something about the tourists who visit that may come for cricket, but come here in 2024, but because they love the island so bad, will come back in 2025, Mr. President.
Barbados has the highest visitor repeat rate in the world.
And the leader of government business is telling me that Barbados has the highest rate, what did you say, of repeat tourism rates in the world, Mr. President. But I don't want to just talk about tourism, because my whole presentation, Mr. President, and again, people also have to listen as they want others to listen to them, was all about, what was it? People and the benefits for people, Mr. President. It was about the benefits for people and for the ordinary Barbadian, and that is the long-term, that is the long-term benefit, that is the legacy benefit, Mr. President, that this country will have from Cricket World Cup, Mr. President. That is the legacy benefit that we will have. Yes, Mr. President, it is the investment in cricket. And that is why we are doing Kensington Oval. That is why we will do the drop-in pictures, Mr. President. That's why we have the multiple different types of covers. I'm not an expert, so I can't remember all the different, I think we got 2 different types. Prime Minister said, God got 2 different types of covers to be able to facilitate. Making sure that we will have a facility where we can do indoor cricket, Mr. President. That is also part of the roles and part of the longer-term development of Kensington. So that is there, Mr. President. The data is there that they asked for. The data is there. The benefits for the average man, that is there, Mr. President. Are we still going to butt? Are we still going to butt, Mr. President? Are we still going to butt? Is this government saying that in our efforts, we may have covered 100% of everything? No. But this government is saying is that it is making and has made every single effort to ensure, Mr. President, that it is deliberate design that we have as much as possible made sure that we have attended, one, to the inclusion of people. And as I talk about the inclusion of people, I also want to recall that there was the issue of vendors, Mr. President, being relocated. And again, you know, it's unfortunate how people like to string things together and pull strands from here that are not related. Mr. President, the vendors that were moved were vendors that were moved from the bus terminal, Mr. President, in town. The Granville Williams bus terminal, Mr. President. Because there was reports that the bus terminal was leaking, Mr. President. So for everybody's safety, we had to move the vendors, Mr. President. We didn't close them. It had nothing to do with World Cup. The roof was leaking. And already we have said, as soon as the repairs are completed, those vendors will be returned to their place, Mr. President. Nothing to do with World Cup, Mr. President. But we can hear the big hullabaloo, remove vendors, Mr. President, as a scare tactic, as to be able to fool the public, Mr. President. Mr. President, as I close, I want to close where I started. Because again, there are some of us, when we talk about data, we talk about economic benefits, that are not able to see anything else. And the economic benefits are important. But I want to suggest, Mr. President, again, that there is a national pride, that there is a holding back of the shoulders and a raising of the head that will do something to the Barbadian psyche, Mr. President. From us being able to say to the world that we will host the best World Cup there is, that we can, Mr. President. There is something that will happen, Mr. President, to the little boy that is intended to have a career in cricket, when he feels that he can be proud that his country, that the little 2x6 place where he comes from, and the community is the one, Mr. President, that is lauded. Mr. President, is the one that put the best foot forward in the hosting of this Cricket World Cup, Mr. President, and that is legacy. That is legacy that we cannot buy or pay for, because once we have that, once we are able to inculcate that sense of pride, that rallying, Mr. President, then we have a Barbadian that remembers, Mr. President, that remembers that journey from struggle to resilience, Mr. President. That we have that Barbadian who remembers that they will be able to overcome. And that is something, Mr. President, you cannot buy, Mr. President, you cannot put a price on. It is those intangible things, Mr. President. Legacy things. And there are some things that a government has to do, Mr. President. And that the benefits may not always, in this case they will, but they may not always be seen up front in the short term. But there are things, Mr. President, that we do, Mr. President, for long term, Mr. President. Mr. President, again, I am fully in support of this bill, in support of the Barbados government's effort to ensure that we host World Cup 2024, in full support of government's efforts to ensure that ordinary Barbadians can benefit, in full support of government's effort to ensure, Mr. President, that we can say to the Barbadian public who driving on the roads, Mr. President, to the entrepreneurs, Mr. President, that they will see benefits, Mr. President, from Cricket World Cup 2024. Mr. President, I beg that this bill be read a second time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chantal Monroe-Knight. The question is that this bill be read a second time. The honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg that Your Honour now leave the chamber and the chamber be dissolved into committee for further consideration of this bill. Leave the chair. Sorry.
The question is that I do not leave the chair and the Honourable Senate dissolve itself in the committee for further consideration of this bill. The honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The Senate is now in committee.
Madam Chair, permission to call in parts, please.
Permission granted.
Part 1.
Madam Chair, as we consider part 1, I want to note that I want to inform the Honourable House, Mr. President, Madam Chair, I want to make an amendment, to move an amendment to part 1, where clause 3 previously was deleted from part 2 and is now to be inserted under part 1.
The question is that there be an amendment to part 1, which moves clause 3 of part 2 into part 1. All honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it.
Part 2, clauses 4 through 22.
Madam Chair, I do beg that Part 2, clauses 4 to 22 stand part.
The question is that Part 2, clauses 4 through 22 do now stand part. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Part 3, clauses 23 through 26.
Madam Chair, I do beg that Part 3, clauses 23 to 26 do stand part.
The question is that parts 23 through 26 of clause 2, 3 do now stand part. All honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Part 4, clauses 27 through 38.
Madam Chair, I do beg that Part 4, clauses 27 to 38 do stand part.
The question is that part 4, clauses 27 through 28 do now stand, 38. Part 4, clauses 27 through 38 do now stand part. All honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 39 through 46.
Madam Chair, I do beg that clause 39 be amended, 39(1) be amended to read, Mr. President, Madam Chair, where a person is engaging or is proposing to engage in conduct in contravention of section 720, deleting part 4 and part 5 and replacing it.
Madam Chair, although that is the actual amendment, is at 39(1), we are replacing parts 4 and part 5 as listed there, and replacing with the words 23 to 26, 27. You don't have to read out.
The honorable senator will be guided by the clerk and will put the information to the chair as appropriate. The chair will then put the question to the Senate.
Madam Chair, I beg that the amendment to clause 39(1), the words part 5, part 4, and 5 be deleted, and the words 23 to 26, 27, 28, and 32 be substituted therefore.
Question is that the words part 4 and 5 be deleted, that 23, 26, 27, and 32 substituted therefore. All honorable senators in favor, would you please say aye? All honorable senators against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
So part 6, which is a new part is inserted, and the senator would move the amendment, but it incorporates clauses 47 through to 51.
Madam Chair, I beg that clauses 47 to 51, originally in part 5, under the heading Remedies, have now been replaced under a new part 6 with the heading Miscellaneous. He doesn't have to read that one first. So, Mr. President, Madam Chair, I beg to move that clauses 47 to 51, originally in part 5 under the heading Remedies, should now be placed under a new part 6 with the heading Miscellaneous. And stamp part.
Question is that an amendment do now stand part, and that amendment is that sections 47 to 51 under Remedies be moved into a new part 6 to be titled Miscellaneous. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it.
First schedule.
Madam Chair, I beg that the first schedule be the first schedule to the bill.
The question is that the first schedule be now the schedule to the bill. All honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
The second schedule.
Madam Chair, I beg that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill.
The question is that the second schedule be now the second schedule to the bill. All honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. All honorable senators against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Report.
Madam Chair, I do beg that you now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable senators in favor, would you please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the ICC Cricket World Cup West Indies Act 2024.
The question is that this bill do not pass and be cited as the ICC Cricket World Cup West Indies Act 2024. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The ayes have it. This bill is now passed and so cited.
Order number 4, sir. In the name of Senator Dr. the Honorable Chantal Monroe Knight, Minister in the Prime Minister's Office, to move the second reading of the Visiting Police Forces ICC Cricket World Cup 2024 Bill 2024.
Senator Dr. Monroe Knight.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that your honour do not leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do not leave the chair and the Honourable the Senate resolve itself in a committee for further consideration of this bill. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The ayes have it.
The Senate is now in committee.
Clauses 1 and 2.
Madam President, I beg to move that clauses 1 and 2 do now stand part.
The question is that clauses 1 and 2 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Honourable senators against, please say no. The ayes have it.
Clauses 3 through 6.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that clauses 3 through 6 stand part.
The question is that clauses 3 through 6 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Clauses 7 and 8.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that clauses 7 and 8 do now stand part.
The question is that clauses 7 and 8 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Clauses 9 through 12.
Madam Chair, I do beg that clauses 9 through 12 do now stand part.
The question is that clauses 9 through 12 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Clauses 13 through 17.
Madam Chair, I do beg that clauses 13 through 17 do now stand part.
The question is that clauses 13 through 17 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Clauses 18 through 21.
Madam Chair, I do beg that clauses 18 through 21 do stand part.
The question is that clauses 18 to 21 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Clauses 22 through 24.
Madam Chair, I do beg that clauses 22 through 24 do now stand part.
The question is that clauses 22 through 24 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Schedule.
Madam Chair, I do beg that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the schedule be now the schedule to the bill. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Report.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Visiting Police Forces ICC Cricket World Cup 2024 Act 2024.
The question is that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Visiting Police Forces ICC Cricket World Cup 2024 Act 2024. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is now passed and so cited. And based on the amendments made as directed and as approved by the Honorable Senate, on your behalf, I will sign the necessary formal message to the House of Assembly for their concurrence in those technical amendments. Senator Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Having concluded government's business for today, I beg to move that the Senate be adjourned. Sign aye.
The question is that the Honorable the Senate be now adjourned, sine die. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The ayes have it. Senate now stands adjourned, sine die.